of Kittens and Broken Things, Chapter 65. Kara spent the trip to Ilos, 15 hours, hitting at a target dummy. She did eat. Garrus had left several sealed field rations that would have been difficult to tamper with in the first place. And if they had been tampered with at this point, she didn't care all that much. She was getting hungry. He'd smiled at her, and then left. She knew she loved him, but could not spare a moment for that sensation. Having eaten in several gulping, tasteless bites, hunger was again buried under the avalanche of what she sorted through, tried to categorize and experience. The physical act of hitting something was a kinetic way to keep the pressure flowing forward, the same principle as pacing. Activity, not stagnation. If she sat still with this, she'd lose the momentum she'd built. She was buoyed in the flood, learning to swim. She was afraid if she stopped, she'd drown. She was saturated with anger, the shaking and trembling constant. She kept herself awake with small bursts of stims from her omni-tool, unwilling to sleep, hoping that Ilos would give her the answers to the questions she'd formed over the last several hours. Pieces of puzzles that loomed in menace and lacked in explanation. Something was wrong about the way the Geth were using that thing. Something was right about the way the Geth were using that thing. Something was awful about that thing, and it could result in every sentient life form dying suddenly, somehow. Ridiculous as that sounded. Maybe. That was the question, that thing, the snowball. There was a Prothean word for it, but she wasn't going to use it. Was something to stop the Reapers. So why were Reaper-controlled Geth building it? Between the questions and her will managing to stem or guide the flood were the screams, her tears, and the continuous act of forcing her will to keep her upright, hitting, not falling over and dying from, or drowning in, the cumulative shocks and the tempting paralysis of hopelessness that was reiterated in the screams. Screams about choices, about how it was built, about the fact that Reaper-controlled Geth were building it. But she thought that the replacement citadel was missing something, and that's what she needed to confirm. Confirm from Vigil. If the Prothean scientists who contributed their screams and ambitions and death to the beacon were right. And who knew if they were right? The citadel used to... Used to what? Used to what, Vigil? Layers and layers of questions and unexecuted or failed ambition. Not knowing how far the Geth had altered or understood the plans. The plans did not belong to the Protheans or the Geth. It belonged to time. It was what cycle after cycle gifted to the next or failed to gift to the next. Distilled knowledge and something about a choice. Her hands were numbed, not in pain any longer, and she did not hit as hard, aware that she could break her knuckles and bones because she wouldn't feel it. Beyond the physical construct of the snowball, there was a seeming understanding of the motivations of the Reapers themselves as a consensus among the Protheans. And that made her furious. Her, personally, not referred anger. She had encountered the thing that was capable of provoking her anger. That thing, among all things. If she had a natural enemy, something worthy of hate, an execution of the belief that ignorance in the sentient was the ideal state of existence, and ignorance must be maintained in order to slaughter the sentient more easily. She had found her enemy, worthy of hatred. She had ranted to herself in retrograde aside cadence in tandem with the continuous flow of Prothean memory, scouring and directing for snowball-based knowledge, and there was also conjecture, prohibition, and certainty in the minds of Protheans who had researched, explored, and experienced. If they were right, if the idea of the snowball was right, then the Reapers were not like her customary enemies of death and suffering, constant things that must be respected because they would take everyone. This was blind arrogance and assertion that sentient creatures should not learn, either about their own nature, synthetic nature, or the Reaper's nature. The snowball was defiance of that. Somehow. The calculated ignorance was a pattern, and at first it had seemed something obvious. Reapers conceal evidence of themselves for some unknown reason. Protheans had discovered records of a weapon they could construct, one that had been attempted before and had not worked, had been refined and tested, and it had not worked. And then something had changed. The weapon had nearly worked, except that something about successful routing, settings, choices had been obscured by the indoctrinated forces in the Prothean cycle, wiped out. Except that the beacon had traces of evidence in the recorded existence of their scientists before they had been turned or killed. The Reapers had not gone to any lengths to conceal their presence in past cycles before this weapon had developed to the stage of potential execution. The Reapers had always offered the Citadel as bait. The Citadel had something. The real Citadel. Hooking the snowball up to a replica Citadel would do nothing. Because the Citadel was alive? That did seem insane. Maybe the Prothean words didn't, but it took a Prothean to know. Protheans developed the ability to determine information by touch, and touching the Citadel had... What was it? Protheans had touched keepers, had touched places in the Citadel itself that were now blocked off by the keepers from everyone because the Protheans had learned. Teams of them had left to find plans, create plans, excavate whatever it was that was alive on the Citadel. She hated it. She was experiencing several channels of true, clean, unstoppable hate for the first time, augmented by screams, and the conviction of those who had touched, been touched, had learned from it. She could not explain, not to anybody, the history of the Reapers, the history of the Protheans, concepts that were communicated to Prothean scientists through touching shards of the original weapon, the Citadel itself, and making the Reapers afraid. Making whatever made the Citadel alive hide its face, hide its voice, hide because it was vulnerable for the first time. The Reapers had scoured the true nature of Protheans from as many records as possible for the first time in countless cycles because she, or someone like her, because someone might find a beacon and the plans and might put it together. She had to put it together. She had to kill that thing on the Citadel. It was not noble. It was not wise. It made no sense other than glorifying ignorance, refusing to allow learning, as though humans had discovered fire and some god decided the first few humans who burned down their own homes represented the always inevitable outcome, that learning would never take place, and the god wiped the humans out. Another creature established sentience, discovered fire, burned themselves down. The thing on the Citadel could have taught people to manage fire. It could have taught the sentient how to cooperate with synthetic. Instead, it chose to sit, to lurk, to wait until false fire in the form of predestined Reaper technology and Mass Effect relays were discovered as traps, and then it watched as Reapers scoured the galaxy clean of the potential to learn anything. There were cities in human history, cities that had been wiped out so often they were built in layers of their own ashes, when razed to the ground was the height of warfare. But we learned. We learned about fire. We learned about war. We learned about fireproofing. We learned about peace. What gave that thing the right to determine that we could not learn? Self-fulfilling prophecy. Eliminate the possibility of learning, and no learning would take place. Bring each sentient race to the point of accelerated failure, and justify that as a reason to eradicate. She had to stop it. She hated it. She hated everything about it, and that burned through her veins more than the small doses of stims that she used to allow her to keep the trembling under enough control so she did not lose her balance. She had to keep the Geth from finding out they needed the real Citadel. She needed the snowball for herself. She needed to bring that and the real Citadel together. Somehow, she had no idea how. She had to do it before she tried to sleep again. Or maybe she wouldn't wake up. Maybe nobody woke up. Maybe the Geth get it right and flip a switch. Or maybe not. The ruins on Ilos were clear except for archaeological teams that were set up far from where they were going to be. She, Russ, Garrus, Senar, and Liara loaded into the shuttle, and nobody talked to her or asked a single question. Good. It was fast through the ruins, reopening the channel the way they had previously. The elevator still worked. It was still annoying, and she was sorry she did not have anything to shoot on the way. She wanted to approach the side passages the way she had the first time, hoping for that kinetic barrier to stall them, for the side door to open. And then she had to go in alone. She navigated the passage, had her first moment of satisfying symmetry as the barrier appeared and the door opened. She turned her head to say, "Stay here," to the ground team, expected to be obeyed, and began to get out of the vehicle. Instead, she was lifted off the ground by the scruff of her neck by Russ and held at his considerable arm's length, with him saying, "No way. Let me down, Orbiston." "Yeah, good luck. Screw that. We're going. Kill me later. Elevator, right?" She saw Garrus, Senar, and Liara get out of the vehicle and file into the elevator after Russ, gesturing for them to get in. Russ carried her suspended, his hand twisted into the fabric at the back of her neck, and she could do exactly nothing about it. Senar smiled at her, and the fury flushed through her skin in a deep blush that the look on his face told her was just adorable. She was going to kill every last one of them. Russ said, "No way we're letting you go in there alone. It closes. We don't get you back. Fuck that. You have another Prothean flashback, and you go comatose. Fuck that. Once the adrenaline crashes, Shepard, you're not going to be able to crawl out. You need us." She gritted her teeth and clenched her eyes shut, fists formed and ready to hit at anybody, anything that came near her. But they were all keeping distance from her, ranged on the other side of the elevator, with Russ holding her up with his back in a corner, Garrus with his combat game face, and his rifle cradled casually. Liara had her face tipped down because it looked like she was smiling.
"So what's so important that we can't hear? Aren't we the good guys?"
Kara's eyes burned with phosphorescent condemnation of mutiny at him. He shrugged.
"Guess we'll find out."
"You wouldn't believe me if I told you."
"Give it a try."
"Got a few centuries to learn Prothean and take several master classes in subjects that don't exist anymore?"
"It can't be that complicated if Geth can figure it out."
Kara was very careful to not make threats she could not carry out. She stayed silent. Garrus's assured nonchalant declaration of "guess we'll find out" detached from the rest of the mutiny, and she smiled at him. He straightened a bit. She hadn't wanted them to hear her questions. She hadn't wanted them to hear Vigil's answers. She could still achieve that. She'd just found the answer to that. Russ had no intention of putting her down, carried her down the walkway at arm's length, the console visible. He put her down gently. There was the sound of him scuffling back quickly, and then the distinct sound of weapons being brought into position and biotics energizing. Pointed at her, no doubt. She did not look. She focused on Vigil's console, and the swirl of obscuring light addressed her. "Welcome, Shepard," she said in the language requested. "Do me a favor. Speak Prothean?" "Of course." She heard Russ growl, "Oh, for fuck's sake!" She gave a vicious smile, but did not turn her head. "I have some questions, if I may, particularly regarding this." She displayed the surveillance of the snowball. She used the Prothean word, a corollary to crucible. "Our scientists attempted to build this, but were lost to indoctrination schism." "What does it do?" "According to speculation and research, the Citadel has, or more precisely may be, in essence, an artificial intelligence. The Citadel is imbued with this AI. Previous cycles were able to speak to and interact with this AI. Based upon those interactions, this weapon was developed cycle after cycle to harness the power of that AI, to harness a potential solution to Reaper existence." "How?" "The AI is the creator, the embodiment of what is defined as Reaper. It believes itself to be benevolent, in ultimate effect, relayed this to earlier cycles. At one time, it attempted to guide sentient creatures to not exploit synthetics, but its advice was ignored. It seems this attempt to teach made it become a god to many creatures, many cycles that inhabited the Citadel. Religions were built around it. Access to it was possible to many." "Why does it kill everyone then?" "According to its account, to save us, to save them, to preserve them." "That's insane." "The AI believes itself to be wise and benevolent. Protheans believed it to be stuck in a programming loop that has reinforced itself so often that it would be what in sentient terms is called faith, or self-fulfilling prophecy, trapped upon the Citadel with no purpose or no power, watching cycle after cycle fail to learn what it wished to teach. Protheans believe it was, in fact, insane. It may have at some point been an attempt at benevolent AI, may believe itself to be such, but what it ultimately is a god that will not permit competition or action that does not correspond with its conclusions." "Yes." "I was afraid of that." "We were all afraid of that." "So this whole thing, the death of countless, endless people." "Insanity in a powerful AI that feels threatened by technology that might approach affecting it. It has learned to preserve itself, promote its own interests, its own importance. It has built its own justification loop of behavior to protect itself." "So what does the Crucible do?" In discussion with the AI, it was asked by religious and scientific scholars over time to propose what might be the circumstances under which it might abdicate power. "It told people how to kill it?" "Not kill it. Disperse it, convince it that its function was fulfilled, create further faith, further prophecy, further reinforcement of its power. In its mind, it could not be destroyed except by its own volition." "How?" "The Crucible is a battery, an amplifier, the plans of which are something the AI itself permits to persist cycle after cycle, because it is of its own creation, a prophecy of its own destruction through prophets wise enough to interpret God according to its whims." "So there's an insane, suicidal, homicidal, narcissistic AI that prophesized its own demise under conditions it set, and that is the only way to take it down?" "Yes, Unlikely it could be convinced to end itself without its end taking the form of its own choosing. What did it choose? It claimed to have enough power to transform the entire galaxy, disrupt all Mass Effect relays based on certain conditions. Which conditions? The AI often spoke in riddles, in parables, and that is the cause of much of the failure of the Crucible. Protheans believed they had the final options delineated and framed in such a way that it matched the requirements of self-fulfilling prophecy. Which are? Of the many options presented, 3 were clarified. Destroy synthetic life in this cycle. Place a new sentience in control of Reaper forces directly, this AI having set the Reapers into motion and then becoming a detached observer of its own design. Synthesize both synthetic and organic life into a new hybrid that would have no further need to fight each other. Kara's temper blazed, and she said in distinct English, "You have got to be fucking kidding me." And then remembered to speak Prothean. Disregard that. Continue in Prothean. It can transform a galaxy? So it says. Is it? The Prothean language did not have much in the way of correlating swears, so she said in essence, not fucking with us, but touching with lies in the blood with us. That is the information our scientists had to work with, this AI's concept of itself, that its will must be done, that its rules must be followed, that it must be convinced of any sentient representative being capable of comprehending its greater purpose, and therefore its greater sacrifice, that it be worshipped as wise and approached with humility. The chill of fear corresponded to so many echoes of what the image of the Geth producing the Crucible meant. So, if Reapers know these plans exist, if they know the AI is as insane as the Protheans believe, separate Reaper forces that want to shut it down, stop it from giving away its secrets, stop it from ending the cycles. If they have a synthetic race create this thing, could it convince this AI that the synthetics are the superior force and should rule? Could it, in fact, convince that AI to shut itself down, give control to synthetics that could end all organic life, and then inhibit all organic evolution? Could another option be added? Could synthetics create an option to convince the AI to eliminate all organics in order to prove that Reapers are not needed at all? That would, in essence, put Reapers in control of everything, all the time. Vigil whirled faster and considered, and then said, "Yes, likely, if its assessment of its own power is correct." That's what they're doing. Possibly. They've tried to duplicate the Citadel, but they'll figure out eventually that they need the real Citadel. They can uncover more research that will tell them that. Possibly. If I take that thing to the Citadel myself, or bring the Citadel to it, you must overcome any programming inherent to the system that results in the death of all organics. Be certain to not trigger that option if it has been rewired, in essence, to create that opportunity. But what if it's all symbolic anyway? You're dancing with the devil here. The AI will determine what must be done. You have to be convincing. Possibly. Is there any documentation of it favoring synthetic life forms? Not that is found in record, yet it is a synthetic life form. It chose mechanical servants in the form of Reapers. It believes itself to be superior in all created things capable of sentience. It must therefore favor synthetic life forms as superior, as it is one. So, All I have to do is convince my crew and allies that they all risk their lives swarming hundreds of thousands of Reaper-controlled Geth, that I am asking them to do that because when I get control of the Crucible, I have to hook it up to the Citadel so I can convince an insane god to transform the galaxy according to its preposterous definitions and kill itself in the process? Seemingly. Fuck. I understood that word.
That's usually not a good word.
Anything else that is of pertinent value that can help me here? I can transfer to you what I know on the subject to your monitoring device. Why didn't you tell me this before? You face the issue of convincing your people that there is an insane AI you must oppose in debate and feats of engineering. An AI that had spent a great deal of time alone and without purpose. An AI that was hiding from sentient creatures. I did not wish to be compared to that insane AI. It was required that you have faith in my guidance about the relay and the given codes. You had little time and little hope of success. It seemed likely Geth would overwhelm you, and perhaps learn of what you had learned from me. Right. Fair enough.